All Elite Wrestling versus WWE. It appears that the war is in fact on. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. And within the last 48 hours, the internet has completely broke with wrestling news from Kenny Omega, from Dolph Ziggler, The Revival, CM Punk. Just everybody talking about different things all over social medias, all over Twitter, all over YouTube. Just it seems like every hour we're getting more and more news on someone requesting a release, someone signing with All Elite Wrestling, or getting contacted by All Elite Wrestling. We're going to talk about all that here on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. But before we get to the episode, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell for notification, as we're trying to get to 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling's Double or Nothing. And if you are listening on iTunes, make sure you give us a 5-star review so that more people listen to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. So, yes, we know All Elite Wrestling has not had a show yet. They don't even have a TV deal. They don't even have a full roster yet. But
they may not even have a wrestling ring yet.
They might not have a wrestling ring. And yet, they have seemed to have started a war with WWE. At least the wrestling fans have started to think that a war has started just between the last 48 hours. How did it get to this level so quickly?
Right. Well, I think for the first time in the wrestling industry in a very long time, there's something that's newsworthy and there's something that the fans can literally get behind and be excited about. You know, I think we've gotten to this point because for so long, I don't know if complacency is really the right word, but the WWE hasn't necessarily been producing compelling content to the point where the fans are invested on a weekly basis. So I think that's certainly part of it. And because they've alienated a certain demographic, if you will, the more hardcore wrestling fan, and moved to the latter part of the entertainment and sports entertainment, you've pushed away a good portion of your fan base. I think that's reflective in the ratings, which we've talked about endlessly on this show. T-shirt sales, not pushing the right guys, not given the right opportunities. So when you push that big portion of your fan base out, they either remain dormant, and once they have something to latch onto, which in this case is All Elite, they're going to hop right on that train and ride it straight to the station, so to speak.
Now, there's a lot of rumors and speculations about, this guy asking for a release, that guy walking out at the end of his contract, and nothing has been fully confirmed.
Right.
But I want to start off with the Revival, which seems to be the big topic that everybody's been talking about for the last couple of days.
Yeah.
So this all started with Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com tweeting out a GIF of the Revival saying "top guys out,"
right, and
walking out. Now that led to a website called bodyslam.net to check their sources to see if there is any validity to this GIF hinting that the Revival are trying to leave WWE. They said that they asked for their release after their match with Lucha House Party. Then, 24 hours later, we heard from Dave Meltzer on his Wrestling Observer radio show that, in fact, happened. After Lucha House Party, they asked for their release. They're very frustrated with what's going on with themselves, the tag team division, and they want out. What does this mean for the Revival in WWE? Because it seems like WWE are not going to grant the request of the release as what we saw on Twitter from WrestleVotes. Maybe they are trying their hardest to keep the Revival and actually end up pushing them because of this.
Yeah. Well, I don't see them legitimately pushing the Revival, because if they were going to do that and fully invest in them, I think they would have done that by now. The Revival was one of, if not the hottest tag teams in all of NXT. They were producing great matches with DYI, AOP, pretty much anybody they stepped in the ring with, they were able to put on a great show. So they certainly had all the credentials and everything that you would need to become you would suppose be a great tag team on the main roster. Now, we know they debuted. There were some injuries to both of them, pretty much back-to-back, which kind of derailed things. But if there's one thing that the WWE has consistently not done, so to speak, it's been fully invest in tag teams.
Yes.
For whatever reason. And I think the Revival sees that, and I think the Revival also sees that there is a very crowded pool of talent on WWE. So them stepping aside and maybe going to All Elite Wrestling, they now have the chance to fully, show everybody what they're fully capable of. And I don't necessarily think that would be the wrong decision. I just know, based on reports from what we're reading, that WWE, if people are asking for a release from their contract, from what we're reading and what's been speculated, is they're going to freeze their contracts. They're not going to let them out of their contracts. They're not going to let them go to a rival promotion and essentially compete against them.
Do you see the Revival or the other rumor of Mike and Maria Kanellis, which Maria Kanellis shot down those rumors on Twitter, but more and more of these frustrated talents pull what Neville did and just walk out, stay home for the remainder of his contract, and then head somewhere else?
Yeah. I mean, I think for some of them, it's certainly possible. And I think especially some of the guys like the Revival, or even if you want to look at like a guy like Nakamura, again, you have to think of it as the wrestler and the fan. I'm sure the fans look at that and they say, okay, that guy's got to be frustrated with his position in the company. But we don't really know that. Are the Revival frustrated? I'm sure they are. Are there other people who are certainly okay with just showing up to house shows, performing, and collecting a check? Sure, because at the end of the day, they probably have bills to pay, they have families to feed, and, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are some people who maybe want to take their talents elsewhere and perform on another stage and really kind of show what they can do. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people do end up leaving the WWE, especially some of those guys that are underutilized, and going to All Elite Wrestling, or going anywhere else for that matter, just to kind of show what they're made of and what they're capable of.
Now, the Revival is a very interesting situation because it seems like the way they've been booked the last month or so, you would think that they are getting buried with, getting screwed after this match and screwed in this match and screwed in that match and Lucha House Party rules and
all the
foots on the ropes, everything.
Yeah.
It's like they're booking them to give sympathy to them, to have the fans sympathize what they're going through and eventually lead to a tag team championship win, whether that happens at Royal Rumble or Elimination Chamber or on a random episode of Raw. That's to be determined. But could they be using this as part of a storyline?
They certainly could be. I don't know if one of the things I've always been critical of WWE for is not paying attention to smaller details, and especially using social media to their advantage, because especially now where you have a rival promotion who is so good at using social media to their benefit, you would think that WWE would look to avenues like that to try and get an extra buzz. Like something like this where the Revival, they tweet out, okay, well, they asked for the release. Look at what happened on Twitter today. Look at what's been going on in the internet today. All of that speculation, all of that talk, it certainly brings eyes not only to All Elite Wrestling, but also the WWE product. So could they be doing that? They certainly could be. Do I think they're doing that? I doubt it, just because they never really seem to capitalize on things like that and use social media to their advantage in their promotion and storylines.
That's definitely true. But sometimes social media has really helped someone elevate on the card. Look at Becky Lynch.
Yeah.
Becky Lynch using really social media to get herself to be the most talked about wrestler in WWE. And now she's in segments with John Cena and main eventing pay-per-views. And rumor is that she'll be main eventing WrestleMania with Ronda Rousey. So in some aspects, it's like social media can work. It's just a matter of, one, who's using the social media, and give credit to the Revival because they carry their storyline in social media, because you'll see Dash and Dash Wilder and Scott Dawson tweet out, watch a good tag team wrestling match on Main Event. This is good tag team wrestling. This is bad tag team wrestling. We've been screwed again. Hashtag justice for the Revival. Hashtag FTR, which Dash Wilder filed a trademark for hashtag FTR. Now, for those that don't know what hashtag FTR is, it is the Revival use it for Forever the Revival, but Being the Elite use it for F word the Revival.
That would be fuck.
Yeah, try not to demonetize, Ralph, but that's another thing. So that would make you believe that the Revival are trying to leave WWE and go to maybe All Elite Wrestling or Ring of Honor or New Japan, somewhere where they could be better used and have a better tag team division. But let's move away from the Revival for a little bit. And the other bit of news that broke on Thursday afternoon was that Dolph Ziggler was offered a contract to be a producer in WWE, and he declined the offer. Now, it seems like a lot of WWE officials believe that Dolph Ziggler will be leaving WWE as of January 31st. Some are speculating that he will leave WWE to join All Elite Wrestling. But you also have to remember that he is trying to pursue a career in comedy. He's doing this big tour, I believe, with his brother and some other comedians. It starts January 27th in Phoenix. So what could happen is he has his final appearance with WWE in the Royal Rumble, gets eliminated, goes across the street from Chase Field to whatever venue he's going to be at for his comedy show, have his comedy show, and walk into the sunlight, retire from professional wrestling, and go into comedy.
Yeah.
If you were Ziggler, is this more that, he's done everything he can do in WWE and he wants to see something better in the wrestling profession? Or is he just done with wrestling and wants to really pursue this comedy thing?
Yeah. I think for now, he's definitely going to pursue the comedy thing. I think he's going to take a break from wrestling. I don't know if burnt out is the right word. And again, this is all kind of speculation, but to hear that they're offering him a producer job, I got to believe that there's been some type of conversation between both Dolph Ziggler and the higher ups at WWE saying, look, I just don't want to wrestle anymore to some certain extent. Like if you go from an in-ring role to now you're more of a behind-the-scenes guy, which is totally fine. You could have a successful career doing that, especially somebody like him who's been to the very top in WWE. But to me, that's a little suggestive of him wanting to get away from the more of the in-ring stuff if they're offering that position. But I think he's going to go do the comedy stuff. Am I going to rule out and say that we never see him in an all-elite ring? Of course not, because, one, they're paying, from what we've heard from Chris Jericho and whatnot, that they are paying quite a bit of money.
Right.
And that's the thing right now. That's the hot place to be. That's the talk of the town.
Now, the other thing that we got to talk about, because you brought up contracts, and Chris Jericho, not only did he bring this up in his own podcast, he brought this up on a Chris Van Valet interview on YouTube. And he basically said that his contract that he got from All Elite Wrestling is the highest contract he ever got.
Yep.
Now, this, according to reports, has led to WWE saying, listen, not only are we going to match whatever they're offering, but we will do as much as double what they are offering. So as long as you give us something in writing that they are going to offer X amount, we'll double it.
Yeah.
Is this just people just trying to throw something out there hoping it sticks? Or do you think there's actually some validity to this and they're scared of A, losing some top talent, and B, missing out on some big free agents that are coming in?
Well, I definitely got to think there's some validity to this. I don't know how true it is that they would pay somebody twice as much, but you're going to see that. I mean, especially if you have a guy like Chris Jericho coming out saying that, this was the best contract I've ever been offered. And if you haven't taken the time or spent the hour listening to Chris Jericho's most recent podcast on Talk is Jericho, I highly suggest going to listen to it because he legitimately lays out from the day he last worked for WWE to the moment he signed with All Elite Wrestling. And it's awesome just to hear him talk about that whole kind of journey. But the Jericho signing is pivotal and important for All Elite Wrestling because it gives them that certain credibility. That's their top guy. Had they gone out and just done it with the Bucks and Cody Rhodes, it still would have been big because they're still going to have the backing of Tony Khan. But to have somebody like Chris Jericho, a name like that, a guy who's been in the industry and worked for everybody, the who's, the Vince McMahons, the Paul Heymans, the Bischoffs, the Ted Turners, he's worked for all of them. For him to come out and say that this was the very best contract he's ever been offered, one, that speaks volumes, and two, it just kind of shows you that, okay, these guys mean business. This isn't just a quick cash grab for them. They're in this for the long haul. They're going to invest time and money in this and effort. So I got to believe that there is a certain element to that story that is true, and that, one, WWE is going to go up and try and gobble up as much young talent on the indie scene as they possibly can, and All Elite Wrestling is going to be right behind them trying to gobble up as much talent as they possibly can as well.
Now, the one thing that is going to be a huge thing here, you have WWE who have, for the longest time, signed wrestlers to exclusive contracts.
Right.
You can't, unless they approve it. You can't go and do shows with Evolve. You can't do shows with Lucha Underground. You can't do shows with Impact, wherever you want to go. All Elite Wrestling, it seems like they are doing the complete opposite with the exception of the Rhodes, the Bucks, and Hangman.
Yeah.
Is that we're signing you to basically they're basically signing everybody as independent contractors, but also saying, listen, if you get hurt in our ring, we'll cover for it. And that's huge. That is absolutely huge and is going to be a big part of this quote unquote wrestling war. The fact that they are offering some form of healthcare where, and I get it, WWE, they may not say, hey, we're going to cover healthcare. And they do treat their wrestlers well. I mean, they have their doctors always on standby, and they send their wrestlers to Dr. Andrews.
Yeah. They certainly do their due diligence.
They do, but I mean, the fact that they're not full-time employees definitely says something. So, bringing this all for full circle, I think what this really could be is that the All Elite Wrestling roster won't necessarily be like WWE's, where AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura, Finn Balor, John Cena will be strictly WWE guys. They are going to fill their roster on a bunch of small independents, depending on what location they're in at that day. So if they're doing a show in the Northeast, maybe they do Northeast Wrestling. If they're in Los Angeles, maybe they do Bar Wrestling, which they were at a couple nights ago and that's Joey Ryan's promotion. We could see Joey Ryan in All Elite Wrestling. And they signed this kid, Jungle Boy Nate Coy. For those who don't know, that's Luke Perry from Beverly Hills 90210's son. He's 22 years old. Haven't seen much of him, but from what I've seen, he is very active. A lot of flips, a lot of flops. He plays the role of Jungle Boy very well. And he actually comes out to that song from the late 80s, early 90s, that like Tarzan song.
Yeah.
I forget the actual name of it. I think it's actually called Tarzan Boy. But this is what I think All Elite Wrestling is going to be. It's going to be, it's All Elite Wrestling and all these small independents versus the big guy in the end.
Yeah, and I think in a certain way, the fans have almost been conditioned to sign with All Elite Wrestling, right? Because for how many years, whether it's true or false, has Vince McMahon kind of pitted himself against the top guys in the industry, the top wrestlers within his own company, right? You've been conditioned to feel like the McMahon family is the evil family and the tyrant family, and nobody gets one over on Vince McMahon. So naturally, even though that's only part of a storyline, you've been conditioned for the better half of like 20 some odd years to feel that way, to feel like Vince McMahon is a legitimate heel, like he's a tyrant who controls the wrestling industry. So now you've got this small company, a band of, I guess you can almost call them misfits, guys that were castaways. Cody Rhodes is essentially a guy that just walked away from WWE. He was Stardust in the WWE, and then he became the American Nightmare, and his life changed forever. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things I want to touch on is you have guys like Jericho and Jim Ross. If you listen to their podcasts, they say, we're not there to compete with WWE. But when you look at it, it's like, Cody Rhodes walked away from the WWE. Chris Jericho, albeit he left on great terms from what he says with Vince McMahon, he was one of the biggest names in WWE. You have Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, all those guys who turned down contracts from the WWE. They held a rally across the street from where SmackDown was. You had them contacting guys like CM Punk, who we know have certain ill feelings against WWE because of the way they separated. Lawsuits over the Too Sweet thing. So they are, in one way or another, whether they want to admit this or not, this is going to be a competition with WWE. You can't say that, we're not competition, we're the alternative. You're the alternative, but if you get big enough, you're damn straight that Vince McMahon notices you as competition, and he's going to try to probably force you guys out the same way he did WCW. But that's what makes it fun for the fans. That's what made the Monday Night Wars fun. That's what's making all of this fun, too.
Now, you touched on a little bit of what's left in our conversation here, a little bit of Kenny Omega, a little bit of CM Punk, a little bit of Jim Ross. I want to start with CM Punk because until maybe this week, people would say, CM Punk is going to come back. CM Punk is going to come back. But it's more
wishful thinking,
hot air, going nowhere.
Yeah.
But now the news coming out earlier this week from Dave Meltzer that All Elite Wrestling has contacted CM Punk. And also, not only that, you start connecting the dots, and it makes a lot of sense because I didn't even know this until I started really looking into the life of Tony Khan, but he grew up and lives in Chicago. Right down the street from CM Punk. CM Punk's in Chicago, so it's very easy to call him. Now, some can say they could get CM Punk to do commentary. They could get CM Punk to be a one-off. They could get CM Punk as a full-time. Are we just still blowing that hot air, wishful thinking, or are we starting to seeing the wheels turn that CM Punk is going to return to wrestling and be a part of All Elite Wrestling?
Right.
Because I know we talked about it in the first round of our All Elite Wrestling draft, and I said that it's going to happen. That also is wishful thinking on my part, but now we're starting to see the news, and it's like,
yeah, I mean, of course I want to see it happen. The problem is he has such a bad taste left in his mouth with how he parted from WWE that I don't know and from even what he said, he does not want to be in wrestling right now. He's still under contract with the UFC. He's going to be doing commentary for Cage Fury. So I don't know. He's not going to be fighting for UFC anytime soon. I know that because, if you go back and watch his 2 fights, he certainly didn't do very well. But he's at least going to be commentating for them at a small level. So we'll see what happens with that. We also have to see what happens with All Elite Wrestling. If they get big enough, if they have enough money, if it's even about money. CM Punk, much like Omega, is a guy who really wants to do things because of the passion of things. Right. I don't get the impression that he's just going to go somewhere for the money. Of course, money certainly helps, but if the stars align right and, it's what's meant to be, then it's meant to be, and he will be there. But as it is right now, being that he's under contract, being that he still doesn't want to be within the wrestling industry from what he says, I don't see it happening anytime soon. So I think at this point, it's still wishful thinking.
It is. It is wishful thinking, but May 25th, I don't see anything happening in CM Punk's calendar right now. I mean, I don't know him personally, so I don't know what he's doing that weekend, but
Vegas is UFC's backyard.
Yes.
That's their town too. So
exactly. So he may be there, maybe as a fan watching the show, maybe he's on TV, but something tells me he'll be on that night.
Yeah.
At some capacity, CM Punk will be in attendance in Las Vegas. You can quote me on that. And then when I'm wrong, you can all just laugh at me watching this video going, hey, he said it and he was wrong. What an idiot.
We'll see.
But another guy that All Elite Wrestling was in contact with recently, Jim Ross. He said on his Ross Report podcast that he, talked wrestling with Shad Khan, Tony Khan's father, talking about the wrestling business and hinting that, you need 2 things in this business to succeed: TV and talent. They're starting to get the talent with Jericho and Rhodes and the Bucks. And, it seems like they're going to do something with bar wrestling at least. They're doing stuff with Dragon Gate. They got Pac, MJF, Joey Janela. So they're building the talent, but they don't have the TV deal yet. And we're starting to get some kind of possible news is that they are going to finalize a deal with TBS. I don't want to necessarily say it's happening because it's still, people tweeting it without any real source, but it seems like they're getting closer and closer to that TV deal. But are they also getting closer and closer to JR getting behind the mic and commentate for All Elite Wrestling?
I'm going to say yes, they are. The reason I'm going to say this is because you remember back, I don't know, this was maybe 5 months ago when we first started catching wind of, there's copyrights that have been taken out for All Elite Wrestling and Dynamite Tuesday and all those things. And most of those reports got shot down, but most of those things actually ended up happening. So some of the names that were thrown around during that time was obviously the Bucks, Hangman, Omega, who we know Omega's not there yet. We're still up in the air. Jericho was another name that was mentioned in that report. So a good majority of the information and those names that were mentioned in that report, it actually happened. Jim Ross was another name that was thrown out there. And just given the fact that he did meet with him, he actually was quoted on his the Ross report as saying a guy like Tony Khan, he talked to him and that he considered him a young genius. A guy like Jim Ross, that's such high praise. Chris Jericho had a 4-hour meeting with Tony Khan, and that's really where Tony Khan convinced him after one of his Fozzy shows or before his Fozzy show. They met for 4 hours. And it wasn't the money that made him decide where he was going to go. Of course, the money helped. He even said that. But it was the 4-hour conversation and where Tony Khan saw the company going, what he wanted to do, and that there was major TV deals being discussed. So all of that taken into consideration, and the fact that that report did mention Jim Ross, I got to say this is going to happen.
I mean, it's hard not to say that it won't happen. But, you know, until I see it, I can't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with CM Punk. I would love to see JR full-time commentating again. I know people have their issues with him doing New Japan Pro Wrestling, but I think being in All Elite Wrestling, he may not have to do such a full schedule like he did in WWE, where he was doing Raws and he was doing SmackDowns and going back and forth at pay-per-views. It's going to be a much lighter schedule, and that's the same thing with a lot of the wrestlers. Right. That will help, is the lighter schedule. Now, who would be his counterpart? I've heard some rumors rumbling that they tried contacting Mike Tenay. I hope those don't come to fruition, because I'm not a fan of Mike Tenay. Some people try to throw out Conrad Thompson as a guy, which, the problem is the guy, his podcasts are not the only thing he does. He's big in the mortgage companies. So he has a big mortgage company in Alabama, and that's really where his money's first and foremost made. So he's going to focus more on that, and then the wrestling comes second. Yeah. So I don't see him being a color commentator or doing anything on air. He's more there for doing like the weekend festival stuff, the Starcasts and stuff like that. Alex Marvez, who was also part of that rally, I think he's going to be the odds-on favorite of being part of the commentary team. He's already changed his Twitter bio to include All Elite Wrestling, and that's where I think it's going to be. If Jim Ross is going to be with someone, it's going to be Alex Marvez. So
yeah. Well, totally out of nowhere, and I don't even know what he's doing. I know he has a podcast that I listen to from time to time, but I don't know what Taz is up to. I know he did some commentary for SmackDown back in the day, and he wasn't bad, and he certainly would bring some credibility. And not only that, but he's going to bring in the older fans from the ECW days. I'm sure he would still get some attraction from that.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's just me thinking out loud, but for all I know, he could be under contract with somebody not even able to do it, but I would like to see him do that. That'd be cool.
All right, let's head to the big news that really broke about hours before we started recording this show, and that is Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega had his first appearance in Japan since he lost the IWGP Heavyweight Championship to Hiroshi Tanahashi. It was at the Tokyo Sports Award. He was accepting the award for Best Bout of 2018 with Kazuchika Okada at Dominion. And he was asked, what are you doing when your contract's up? And he said that he's going to a large international platform. Now, that could mean WWE. That could mean New Japan Pro Wrestling. And that could mean All Elite Wrestling. And then it follows up with, can you get more specific? And he says, I have friends there, and I wish them the best of luck. He's got friends in WWE. He's got friends in All Elite Wrestling. Right. He's got fans in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So we still don't know where the heck this guy's going come February 1st. Can you read between the lines of what he said and make an assumption or make a prediction on what he's saying? Is he saying All Elite Wrestling? Is he saying WWE? Or is he hinting at the other two and swerving us all and staying in New Japan?
Yeah. I think at the very least, what I would speculate is this is Kenny Omega doing what he does best and keeping himself relevant, right? He's not even in the ring, and that was one of the things, going back and forth, all the stuff about who's going where, All Elite, who's asking for a release, and then, of course, late this afternoon, we see this, and that's the talk of all over Twitter. What Kenny Omega was saying, is he trying to insinuate that he's going here or he's going there? I don't know what he means by this, and only he's going to know that, and maybe some that are closest to him. I still personally feel like he's going to go to All Elite Wrestling with the band of his buddies and the guys that he really helped grow the wrestling industry. New Japan, obviously, he was a big part of that, and forming All Elite, he was, even if he doesn't sign, he knows he's a big part of that as well. But I do think he's going to end up there as opposed to New Japan.
Here's why I don't think All Elite Wrestling is where he is signing. Large international platform. Of the three, All Elite Wrestling right now is the least international. Now, I know they are doing stuff with OWE out of China and Dragon Gate out of Japan, but right now, their only shows that they're doing are in Las Vegas and Jacksonville, domestic. Now, the Khans do have a football team in England that is European football, not American football, in Fulham. So maybe it does branch out into the UK and branches out into Japan and China and eventually becomes international. But WWE is the large international platform. Now we hear the news that he shot down the contract offer, and I do also think it's not going to be WWE. And I made this prediction in an old episode that we'll have linked in our description, and the card will go above my head. I said that Kenny Omega will stay with New Japan Pro Wrestling, at least short term. Large international platform could mean New Japan Pro Wrestling, and his friends, he has friends in New Japan Pro Wrestling for being there for so long, whether it's on screen or off screen. Kota Ibushi, maybe Kazuchika Okada he's talking about, maybe Hiroshi Tanahashi he's talking about, Chase Owens. There could be so many different guys. Tamatonga, Tangaloa, anybody he's referring to as friends. In WWE, it's the New Day. In All Elite Wrestling, we know it's the Elite, the Bucks, Hangman, and Cody. So I think he's going to stay in New Japan at least short term and be in the main event of the G1 Supercard, a rematch between him and Hiroshi Tanahashi.
I mean, it's certainly possible. The only reason I don't think that'll happen is because we know that money's not a motive for him, at least for everything that we've been led to believe, because we know that WWE has offered him a lot of money from what we've been told, from what we've read. They offered him a lot of money and he turned it down, right? So that leads you to believe that he's making his decision primarily off emotion. So where does he want to go? He's done everything that there is possibly to do in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's main evented Wrestle Kingdom. He's won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. He's had 5, 6, 7 star matches against Okada. Yep. Tanahashi, we know that he had an amazing match with him. He's headlined with Chris Jericho. He's headlined with just about everybody there is to headline, right? So there's nothing left there for him. I think that he comes to the United States. His friends are residing in All Elite Wrestling right now that he's referring to, and that he's the next guy. The guy, when you talk about credibility-wise, him and Chris Jericho are really going to be the guys that head that company and bring it to the level where they want it to go.
Now, you bring up a lot of points that I would say as to why I think he's staying in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And he first and foremost, is very passionate about the wrestling industry. Mm-hmm. And by staying with New Japan Pro Wrestling, I think there's still a story left to tell with Hiroshi Tanahashi.
Yeah, there certainly is. Yeah.
There definitely is. And let us not forget, there's the Kota Ibushi thing. Yes, he gave him an IWGP Heavyweight Championship match, but it ended up being a triple threat match, so they never had that one-on-one match. So he could win the title at G1 Supercard and then drop it to Ibushi at Dominion. And I know people say that Ibushi would never be IWGP Heavyweight Champion because he's technically a freelancer, not signed with New Japan, and they don't want him walking away like Brock Lesnar did way back when. So maybe this leads to he wins the G1 Supercard, Ibushi wins it at Dominion, and then he drops it to Switchblade Jay White. Come down.
Gives him the rub.
Gives him the rub.
It's certainly possible.
So, I mean, it just seems like there's still, while there's a lot of things that he has accomplished in New Japan and most of them are left, I think there's just that one thing that he still has to do, win a title back, have his match with Ibushi, and then once All Elite is established, he will head there. So let us know what you think in our comments on anything that we talked about, whether it was the Revival, CM Punk, Dolph Ziggler, Kenny Omega, and if this is in fact the start of a war between All Elite Wrestling and WWE. If you liked any of the points that we made, make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell for notifications as we're trying to get to 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling, Double or Nothing. And of course, if you please do head to iTunes, give us a 5-star review so that more people listen to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti, and thank you for listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble.